Be sparing with water. Don't start fires outside. The warnings we're all being urged to take seriously on the eve of another hot weekend. The Fire Service says there's a very high risk of wildfires, with parts of the Highlands, Dumfriesshire and Galloway and the borders at extreme risk. Meanwhile, with reservoirs lower than usual, the First Minister has chaired a meeting of the government's Resilience Committee and urged businesses and the public to use water carefully. Our environment correspondent Kevin Keane reports.
It's more than 2 weeks since a huge wildfire started here, and still they're battling it. This was just a few days ago and shows the extent of the area affected, more than half of the RSPB reserve.
So what are we seeing here?
Well, what was here was heather and young trees, and now we're seeing, well, completely charred remains.
Even now, the ground is still smouldering, and places where they thought it had been extinguished are flaring up.
For myself, it's quite sobering. You know, you just think from one tiny little spark, it becomes hundreds of hectares of charred ground, and sadly, you know, a lot of work, and even more sadly, dead animals and creatures that didn't need to die.
Well, you can see here the type of land that the fire has moved through, and all this shrubbery is fuel for it. It's actually this road here which has prevented it going any further, and you can see just how much devastation it's caused in its path.
It's the second year running of concerns about water scarcity, but this year those concerns have come much earlier, and the First Minister has already chaired a meeting of the Scottish Government's Resilience Committee.
In terms of, I think, good preparation and good planning, it was important for us to do that Scottish Government Resilience meeting. We'll keep an eye on things. I think there's a particular eye on what might happen in relation to the agricultural sector in terms of the usage of water and irrigation for them. So I'm keeping a close eye personally, as is the government, on the situation.
The latest water scarcity data shows that most of the country is already on alert, with the largest concern around Loch Maree in the Northwest Highlands. When it comes to wildfires, tomorrow will see the peak of the risk, with most of inland Scotland on a high danger alert.
Drought used to be unusual in Scotland, happening maybe once every 20 years. By 2050, we're expecting these sorts of water scarcity events to be happening every other year. And it's really important that people across society, government, businesses, regulators and the public take whatever action we can do to adapt to a changing climate.
Majority of it's covered in yellow.
Assessing the risk for wildfires is about the dryness of the vegetation, but most start with some form of human ignition, and the fire service is urging people to be extra careful.
We're not asking people not to go out and enjoy the outdoors, asking them to do that, but where they're in areas where there's any form of vegetation at all, that they don't use a naked flame, whether that be a stove, a barbecue, and specifically a campfire. Probably the highest risk would be campfire.
It'll be several more days yet before firefighters are able to walk away from the scene here, but they're already on high alert for more of this to come. Kevin Keane reporting, Scotland, Canich.
The wildfires haven't just been confined to the Highlands. Our correspondent Jamie McIver joins us now from just north of Glasgow. Jamie, the campsies where you are were also alight this week.
They were indeed, Sally, and it's very important to see all this as an issue for the whole of Scotland. Wildfires, as you say, were burning in the campsies through the week. And I think the Scottish Government and public services are well aware of the risks, of the dangers attached to any prolonged period of warm, dry weather. Hence that meeting of the Resilience Committee yesterday. Not only the risk of grass fires, Sally, but also the question of planning early for any further water scarcity. Reservoirs are often lower than you would expect them to be at this time of year. Now, it's important to make the point we're not yet talking about any formal restrictions on the use of water by the public, things like hosepipe bans, but clearly mindful, thoughtful use of water can help to prevent that kind of situation from arising later. Well, back to wildfires though, and remember they can be a significant challenge for the fire and rescue service, tying up time, effort and resources. Until about 10 minutes ago, the local firefighters here were actually out raising awareness of the risks. And one of the frustrations, I think, for the fire service is that many grass fires and wildfires can be entirely preventable, down to things like thoughtless behaviour, like flinging away a cigarette.
Jamie McIver, thank you very much. Make sure you get away from that bus. Thanks a lot.